Why did the base go silent when she finally stood up? That question would haunt Petty Officer Jake Morrison for years. But on that sun-bright afternoon in San Diego Bay, he was too busy laughing to notice the silence coming. The sound of the USS Coronado's horn rolled across the harbor, deep and metallic, blending with the thunder of two Fa-18 Super Hornets climbing into the blue. Families waved from the pier. Cameras clicked. Flags fluttered above polished brass railings. It was a good day to graduate, to be young, to feel invincible. 200 SEALs stood assembled on the parade ground, dress uniforms crisp, shoulders squared, adrenaline still pulsing from the hell of training. They survived. They'd earned their tridents. Every one of them believed they'd joined the elite few who could look down on the rest of the world. And that's when he saw her, standing behind a registration desk near the gate, sunlight glinting off the silver pen in her hand. Selene Parker. To most, she was just a civilian administrative worker, a quiet woman in a standard-issue base uniform, her hair neatly tied back, eyes calm behind dark lashes. Her movements were efficient, precise, almost mechanical as she stamped guest passes and checked family names off the list. To Morrison and his team, she was background noise. "Hey there, receptionist lady," Morrison called out with a grin, his voice carrying across the concrete. "What's your rank?" The question drew snickers from his teammates, 5 other newly minted SEALs who were high on pride and low on humility. Selene didn't look up. Her pen clicked once against the clipboard. "Petty Officer Morrison, your guest list has been confirmed," she said evenly. "Please direct your family members to the designated seating area." Her tone wasn't dismissive, just measured, controlled. But that control rubbed him wrong. He slid the paperwork across her desk harder than he needed to. The papers fluttered, catching a gust from the bay wind. She caught them calmly, squared the edges, aligned them perfectly, and placed her pen in the exact position on the clipboard before continuing to stamp badges. 1, 2, each press of the stamp came exactly 2 seconds apart. She didn't even look at him. "Come on, lighten up," said Danny Torres, Morrison's closest friend. "He's just asking a simple question. You work on a SEAL base, you gotta know how the ranks work, right?" Selene finally lifted her gaze. Her eyes were clear, steady, but unreadable. "I understand enough to do my job effectively, Petty Officer Morrison. Is there something specific you need assistance with today?" Her voice was calm, too calm. It wasn't fear or annoyance. It was the kind of stillness that made Morrison's smirk falter for half a heartbeat, the kind of composure you saw in people who had nothing left to prove. But the other SEALs were watching, and ego demanded a performance. "What I need," Morrison said, leaning forward over the counter, "is for the civilian staff to remember they're working among America's elite warriors. Maybe show a little respect for what we do here." His voice was loud enough for nearby families to hear. A woman holding a small boy looked away. A retired veteran shifted uncomfortably in line. The air grew heavy, not from anger, but from shame no one dared express. Selene's hand didn't pause. She finished stamping a badge, placed it neatly in the waiting hand of a guest, then said softly, "Respect isn't demanded, Petty Officer. It's earned." The words weren't sharp, they were simple, quiet, and somehow that made them sting worse. Before Morrison could reply, the security radio on her desk crackled. "Gate 3 reports suspicious activity. All units confirm visual." The call came from Master Chief Rodriguez, the kind of voice that made men straighten instinctively. And that's when something strange happened. Selene stood, not like a startled civilian, not even like someone reacting to an emergency. She stood with precision, weight balanced, shoulders square, scanning the horizon in a single sweep. The movement was automatic, practiced. The kind of movement soldiers make. For the first time, Morrison's joking expression faltered. Master Chief Rodriguez himself stepped out of the nearby security booth, his face lined from decades in special operations. He'd seen 1,000 young men like Morrison, confident, capable, and too full of themselves to notice the quiet strength standing beside them. "What's going on here?" Rodriguez asked. "No problem, Master Chief," Morrison said quickly. "Just chatting with civilian staff about, military culture." Rodriguez looked from Morrison to Cellini. She was already back at her desk, reorganizing papers with her usual precision. "Petty officer," Rodriguez said quietly, "why don't you and your team get ready for the ceremony? The admiral's arriving soon." "Dismissed." Morrison forced a grin. "Yes, Master Chief." But as he turned away, he couldn't resist one last comment. "Some people," he said loudly, "just don't understand what it means to be part of something bigger than themselves." Cellini didn't flinch. She simply continued working. Rodriguez, however, stayed behind. He studied her, the stillness in her breathing, the steadiness in her hands. There was no embarrassment in her posture, no defensiveness, only quiet endurance. And when she reached for her clipboard, something small slipped from between the papers, a metallic clink against the concrete. A challenge coin. Morrison didn't even notice, but Rodriguez did, and his trained eyes recognized the worn edges, the scratches, the dull gleam of something that had seen years of field use, not the polished kind sold in gift shops. Cellini retrieved it quickly, tucking it away without a word. Rodriguez filed the detail away in silence. "That's no ordinary coin." As the afternoon sun rose higher, the parade ground filled with families, officers, and visiting dignitaries. Cellini continued working with calm precision, directing crowds, checking clearances, ensuring smooth coordination. But Rodriguez kept watching. When a maintenance truck moved too close to the perimeter, she noticed immediately, hand drifting toward her radio, eyes tracking the vehicle until the driver flashed proper clearance. Her gaze never stopped scanning. It wasn't habit, it was training. By 2:30 p.m., the Admiral's car rolled into view. "Attention on deck," a voice barked, and the assembled personnel snapped upright. Everyone except Cellini, who had already straightened into perfect parade rest before the order even came. That tiny instinct, that unconscious, flawless alignment, told Rodriguez everything. No civilian moved like that. He stepped closer. "Miss Parker," he said quietly, "may I ask something?" "Of course, Master Chief." "Have you had military training? Because what I'm seeing doesn't match your personnel file." Cellini's lips curved slightly. "I've had some experience with military procedures, sir. Nothing formal." It was a smooth answer, too smooth. Rodriguez had used that tone himself when he couldn't tell the whole truth. Before he could press further, Senior Chief Hawkins approached. "Master Chief, the ceremony about to begin." His eyes flicked toward Cellini, narrowing slightly. "Ma'am, where'd you learn to manage crowd flow like that? Tactical positioning spot on." "Just common sense," she replied, smiling faintly. "It's safer this way." Hawkins exchanged a look with Rodriguez. Common sense didn't explain that level of precision. Morrison and his teammates watched from the front row as the conversation unfolded. "Why are they talking to her?" Wilson whispered. "Relax," Morrison muttered. "She's just an admin, probably trying to look important." But even as he said it, his voice wavered. Because Cellini Parker wasn't acting like an admin. When the Admiral took the podium and the Navy hymn began, her stance changed again, attention, chin up, eyes fixed forward. And as the verses rolled across the bay, Morrison caught something in her expression that unsettled him. Pride, regret, memory. He couldn't tell which. The ceremony unfolded in precision. Medals presented, names called, applause swelling. The SEALs honored that day represented everything Morrison wanted to be: brave, disciplined, unstoppable. but he kept glancing toward the woman behind the desk, who'd made him feel small without raising her voice. When the final salute echoed and the crowd began to disperse, Cellini moved quietly through the aftermath, coordinating cleanup, guiding families, checking security posts. It was all routine, until the radio crackled again. Base security to all units, unidentified movement near Gate 3. Rodriguez stiffened. Copy that, confirm threat. Unclear, sir. Multiple figures on foot near the north fence line. The Admiral's car hadn't yet departed. The crowd was still thick. A dozen things could go wrong in seconds. Before Rodriguez could issue orders, Cellini's voice cut in. Recommend establishing overwatch on buildings 8 and 15, she said sharply. Best sight lines for secondary breach points. Both men turned to her. How do you know about secondary breach points? Hawkins asked. But before she could answer, the radio screamed again. All units, Gate 3 confirmed hostile activity. Multiple suspects with suspicious packages. This is not a drill. Gunshots cracked in the distance. The crowd froze. Morrison's team snapped into motion, instincts firing, training kicking in, but no one knew who was in command. Officers were scattered. Families were panicking. Then a voice rose above the chaos. Civilian personnel, moved to Building 12 via routes Alpha and Charlie. It was Cellini. Her voice was crisp, commanding, impossible to ignore. SEAL teams establish perimeter security, lock down Bravo and Delta gates. Senior Chief Hawkins, I need overwatch on 8 and 15 now. Hawkins froze mid-stride, body reacting before his brain did. Roger that, Chief. Then silence. Every eye turned toward her. Admiral Thompson's voice broke through the comms. Chief Parker, you have tactical command. All personnel follow Chief Parker's directives immediately. Morrison stared, breathless. Did he just say Chief? But there was no time to question. Orders snapped through the air. Men moved. Civilians were evacuated. Security lines formed. And at the center of it all stood Cellini Parker, calm, precise, commanding. Within 15 minutes, the situation was contained. No breach, no casualties. When it was over, Rodriguez approached slowly. Chief Parker, he said softly, that was textbook crisis coordination. She exhaled, the weight of 8 hidden months pressing on her shoulders. Master Chief, she murmured, some backgrounds are complicated. Rodriguez nodded, eyes filled with respect. Whatever yours is, Chief, today it saved lives. Cellini looked toward the sunset washing over the Pacific, crimson, gold, fading to gray. The crowd was dispersing, the base returning to order. But in the silence that followed, she felt something she hadn't in years. Not fear, not adrenaline. Recognition. And maybe the first flicker of peace. Because the secret she'd buried so deeply had finally surfaced, not through words but through instinct, through action. And for the first time since leaving the field, she realized something simple, something she'd nearly forgotten. You can leave the uniform behind, but you can't unlearn who you are. Why did everyone stop talking when she walked in that morning? Cellini Parker felt it before she heard it, the way conversations dimmed, the way eyes turned and then quickly looked away. The cafeteria smell of coffee and disinfectant filled the air as sailors clustered in small groups, whispering behind half-lifted mugs. Stories travel fast on a base, but when mystery is involved, they fly. By sunrise, every corridor from the docks to the command offices had heard some version of the story. The civilian woman who'd taken command during an active security breach. Some said she'd been a Navy officer once. Others whispered she was CIA or Special Operations. The details changed with each retelling, but one thing didn't. Everyone now called her Chief Parker. She walked through the main gate at 07:30 a.m., calm, precise as always. Her badge clicked against her lanyard. Her boots struck the concrete in even rhythm. But inside, her pulse carried the echo of yesterday's chaos. The air was cooler today, heavy with marine fog that wrapped the base in gray light. She liked mornings like this, quiet, soft, unjudging. Her desk was the same. Clipboard, radio, pen in its exact position. Nothing had changed, yet everything had. A folded note waited on her keyboard. Respect, Morrison. No explanation, no apology written out, just that single word underlined twice. For the first time in months, Selene smiled. A small, private thing that vanished as soon as someone entered the room. Master Chief Rodriguez's footsteps approached, steady as a metronome. "Morning, Miss Parker." "Good morning, Master Chief." He leaned against the counter, studying her face with the quiet curiosity of a man who'd spent decades reading micro-expressions. "You sleep at all?" "I've had worse nights." He chuckled. "That I believe." He lowered his voice. "We're calling yesterday a drill with unexpected complications, officially." Selene nodded, understood. "But off the record," he added, "the Admiral told the Council you prevented a breach. He's reviewing security assignments today." "That's unnecessary," she said quickly. "I was only doing what you were trained to do." Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. Respect, understanding, maybe recognition of shared scars. Rodriguez sighed. "I've seen plenty of operators try to bury what they are. Doesn't work. Eventually, the training, the instincts, they come roaring back. You can't switch that part off." "I'm not trying to," she said softly. "I'm just trying to live quietly." "Quiet doesn't mean invisible, Chief." The word chief hung between them. She didn't correct him. Across the base, 4 young SEALs sat in the mess hall, breakfast untouched. Morrison, Torres, Chavez, and Wilson, the same group who'd laughed the loudest the day before, now sat in silence that felt heavier than armor. Wilson finally said what everyone was thinking. "We made complete fools of ourselves." Torres rubbed the back of his neck. She took command like she'd been born doing it. And the Admiral, he didn't even hesitate. "Chief Parker, you have tactical command." Just like that. "Which means," Chavez added quietly, "she's somebody." Morrison stared at the table. "I asked her rank as a joke." No one responded. He exhaled, pushing his tray away. "I'm finding her after duty. I'm apologizing, for real this time." Torres nodded. "We're all coming with you." Outside, the morning fog began to lift, revealing a base still carrying traces of last night's tension. Extra guards at the perimeter, vehicles idling near the gates, quiet briefings behind closed doors. By 08:30, in a small windowless office, Captain Sandra Williams sat behind her computer, reviewing personnel files with a frown that deepened by the minute. She'd been ordered to verify the background of one Selene Parker, civilian administrative staff, employed 8 months. At first glance, the file was clean, too clean. Every previous employer listed proper references, every background check cleared, but the paperwork felt constructed. Williams had seen this pattern before, legitimate documents built over something classified. She picked up her secure phone. "This is Captain Williams at Coronado. I need a quiet verification on a civilian employee, last name Parker." A pause, then a cautious voice replied, "Understood, Captain. But if you're dealing with what I think you are, tread carefully." Williams closed her eyes. "So it's true." Meanwhile, Selene returned to her duties as if nothing had happened, checking guest lists, coordinating deliveries, filing security badges. Her motions were calm, but under that calm was a silent tremor. Every radio call, every echo of boots on concrete carried the same question. What happens when they find out? At 09:00, a familiar voice broke through her thoughts. "Miss Parker." She turned, and there they were. Morrison's team stood at attention like they were reporting to an officer. No jokes, no swagger. He stepped forward. Ma'am, we wanted to apologize for what we said, for how we acted. It was wrong. You deserved better from us. Selene studied their faces, their discomfort, their sincerity. Youth had been stripped from their expressions overnight. Gentlemen, she said quietly, military service has a way of teaching humility, sometimes the hard way. Consider the lesson learned. Torres swallowed. Ma'am, with respect, whatever your background is, it's an honor to serve on the same base. She inclined her head. Thank you, now get to training, you'll need it. They almost smiled at that, almost. As they turned to leave, she added softly, Petty Officer Morrison. He stopped. Respect is a habit, she said. Keep practicing. He nodded once, the words carving themselves deep. At 10:30 a.m., Captain Williams received a return call from her contact at Naval Special Warfare Command. Captain, I can't discuss this on open lines, but whatever you're digging into, handle it as classified. Extremely classified. Someone from NCIS will brief you in person this afternoon. When the line went dead, Williams sat back in her chair, heartbeat loud in her ears. She whispered to herself, Who are you, Miss Parker? By noon, Selene escaped to her usual lunch spot by the waterfront. The bay stretched before her, steel blue and endless. Seagulls drifted over the carriers anchored in the distance. She unwrapped her sandwich slowly, letting the calm of the water steady her breathing. Yesterday had cracked something open inside her, a door she'd kept locked since the day she signed her medical retirement papers. For months she'd built a routine: file, organize, process, repeat. Keep her head down, stay invisible, don't be remembered. Healing had demanded anonymity. But when the radio screamed, "This is not a drill," her mind hadn't asked for permission. The door had burst open and the soldier inside had stepped through. She thought of the young faces who'd followed her orders without question, the trust in their eyes, the clarity she'd felt giving commands again. It had terrified her and exhilarated her. Hard to stay invisible after that, said a voice behind her. Admiral Thompson stood at the railing, hands clasped behind his back, the sun reflecting off his white gold shoulder boards. Selene rose automatically to attention. At ease, Chief, he said, gesturing for her to sit. We can skip the formalities. This isn't an interrogation. She sat slowly. Yesterday was unexpected, he began. I gave you command authority because it was clear you knew what you were doing. You saved lives. I just acted on instinct, sir. He nodded. Instinct built on training, years of it, I'd wager. She didn't respond. The Admiral studied her quietly. I know the look, Chief. I've seen it in men and women coming back from operations they can't talk about. You don't have to tell me the details, but I want you to know this. Whatever you're running from, you don't need to hide here. You've earned your peace. Her throat tightened. Peace is complicated, sir. It always is. He paused, his tone softening. But understand this, you'll always have a place here. Whether that's behind a desk or on the line, it's your choice. For the first time since the crisis, she allowed herself to breathe deeply. Thank you, Admiral. Thompson stood. Heroes come in many forms, Chief, some in medals, some in silence. As he walked away, Selene watched his reflection ripple across the water, dissolving into waves. At 13:00 hours, a black SUV with tinted windows rolled through the gate. The driver flashed NCIS credentials. Agent Rebecca Collins entered Captain Williams's office 15 minutes later, carrying a secure case. Her expression was serious, but not alarmed. Captain Williams, thank you for handling this discreetly. The woman you're asking about, Selene Parker, is operating under a protective identity. Her real service record is classified at levels well above ours. Williams blinked. Intelligence community. Multiple agencies, special operations crossover. She served in environments most people don't survive. Collins leaned forward. Her current status is voluntary civilian employment. She isn't here on assignment. She's here to heal. So she's not a threat. She's the opposite of that. Williams exhaled. Understood. Just protect her privacy, Collins added. She's earned that much. That evening, as sunlight bled gold across the bay, Selene locked up her office. The base was quiet again. Seagulls traced lazy arcs in the sky. The faint hum of engines drifted from the hangars. She walked toward her car, keys in hand, when a familiar voice called out. "Miss Parker." Morrison jogged up, still in fatigues, hair damp from training. "I already accepted your apology, petty officer." "I know," he said, catching his breath, "but there's something I need to ask. Yesterday, when everything went to hell, you didn't hesitate, you didn't even think, you just took over. Why?" She studied him for a long moment. The young man who had mocked her now looked at her with genuine curiosity. Respect. "Because hesitation costs lives," she said quietly, "and because someone had to." He nodded slowly, absorbing that truth. "Ma'am," he said after a pause, "I hope one day I can handle pressure the way you did." "You will," she said, "if you remember humility is stronger than pride." He smiled faintly, saluted, not out of regulation but respect, and left her standing under the fatting sun. For a moment, Selene watched him go, the sound of his footsteps echoing across the lot. Then she whispered to herself, almost as if confessing to the wind. "I wasn't supposed to lead again." But the sea breeze only carried back the same unspoken answer she'd felt all along. "You never stopped being one." That night, as the base lights shimmered over the dark water, Master Chief Rodriguez sat alone in his office reviewing reports from the incident. Every line repeated the same fact. Chief Parker assumed tactical command and coordinated defense with flawless precision. He leaned back, staring at her name. "Chief Parker." He smiled. "Whoever you really are," he murmured, "it's good to have you back." Outside, the Pacific roared softly against the shore, endless, patient, unchanging, just like the woman who had once tried to disappear inside its silence. What did she think would happen when the past finally knocked on the door? Selene Parker had known it was coming. The knock, the quiet summons, the words that would pull everything buried back into daylight, but knowing didn't make it easier. It came at 600 before sunrise. 3 measured taps against her apartment door, official, not frantic. The kind used by people who never needed to identify themselves twice. She opened it without hesitation. 2 figures stood in the corridor. One she recognized immediately, Master Chief Rodriguez, cap in hand, expression heavy. The other wore a dark suit and badge clipped to her belt, Agent Rebecca Collins, NCIS. "Chief Parker," the agent said, voice calm but firm, "we'd like to speak with you privately." Selene's stomach tightened, though her tone stayed even. "You found me sooner than I expected." Rodriguez gave a small shrug. Word travels fast when the Admiral starts asking questions. She nodded, grabbed her jacket, and followed them into the morning fog. The conference room was windowless, sterile, humming with fluorescent light. Coffee sat untouched on the table. Collins opened a folder filled with redacted lines and faded signatures. "Selene Marie Parker," she began, reading from the file. "Formerly Lieutenant Commander, United States Navy, attached to Special Reconnaissance Task Unit 17. Medical retirement 5 years ago. Service record classified under Operation Mercury." Rodriguez raised his brows. He'd heard whispers of Mercury, covert missions deep in hostile territory, casualties unlisted, success rates whispered in rumors. Collins closed the file gently. "That's the public summary. The rest stays sealed." Selene clasped her hands, eyes fixed on the tabletop. "So what's this about? I haven't violated protocol." "No," Collins said, "you haven't. But your actions yesterday activated a dormant classification tag. Command wants clarification. Clarification, Cellini repeated quietly. You mean justification. Rodriguez interjected. She saved the base. That should be justification enough. Collins gave him a look that wasn't hostile, just professional. No one's disputing that, Master Chief. We just need to ensure her presence here remains authorized. Cellini exhaled. You're checking if I'm still an asset or a liability. Silence. Then Collins said softly, off the record, Chief, they want to know if you're ready to serve again. The words hit harder than she expected. She built her new life on the belief that chapter was over. Why now, she asked. Because, Collins said, leaning forward, yesterday proved something no report could. Your instincts are intact, and we're short on leaders who can keep calm when the world catches fire. Rodriguez watched her closely. They're asking you to come back. Cellini looked down at her hands, the faint scars tracing across her knuckles. Back. The word felt heavier than her weapon ever had. I didn't leave because I couldn't handle the field, she said quietly. I left because the field couldn't handle what it turned me into. Collins nodded slowly. We're not here to drag you into a uniform, but if you want to contribute again, there's a place for you, even if it's just advisory. For a long moment, Cellini didn't answer. Then she asked, almost to herself, and if I say no? Then you stay exactly where you are, Collins replied. We close the file and you go back to living quietly. The offer hung in the air like a loaded weapon, harmless until touched. After they left, Cellini walked alone along the waterfront. The horizon was bleeding into dawn, sky painted with streaks of gold and violet. Waves rolled in slow rhythm against the pylons. She remembered another dawn, years ago, in a desert half a world away. The smell of dust, the static in her earpiece, the voice of a young soldier screaming for medevac that never came. She commanded a team that day. 12 went in, 9 came out. That was Operation Mercury. That was why she left. No one had blamed her officially. The mission was labeled a success, but she'd carried every casualty home in silence, each one heavier than her rank insignia. Now the ghost stirred again. She sank onto a bench overlooking the water, head bowed. For the first time in months, she let herself whisper the names she never said aloud. When she looked up, Morrison was standing 10 feet away, uncertain whether to approach. "Morning, ma'am," he said softly. "Didn't mean to intrude." "You didn't." He hesitated, then sat beside her. The bay wind ruffled his short hair. "Word going around you might be a former spec ops." She gave a faint smile. "People talk." "I'm not asking for details," he said. "I just wanted to know how you carry it. The weight. We train for pressure, but we don't train for what comes after." Cellini studied him, his youth, his honesty. "You don't carry it," she said finally. "You learn to live beside it." He frowned. "How?" "You remember why you did it, and you forgive yourself for the parts you couldn't fix." He nodded slowly, the words landing deeper than she intended. When he left, she sat there a while longer, the morning sun burning away the fog. By midday, Captain Williams summoned her to the command office. Admiral Thompson was waiting. His expression was unreadable, but the respect in his eyes was clear. "Chief," he began, "NCIS has briefed me. You don't owe us any explanations, but you should know command's considering reinstatement under advisory status. Voluntary only." Cellini remained silent. "We're reorganizing base security," the admiral continued. "You demonstrated natural leadership under pressure. I want you to oversee training for emergency response protocols, civilian-military coordination." She blinked. "You're asking me to train SEALs." "Not just SEALs," he said. "Everyone. We need minds that see patterns before they form. You have that gift." Her throat tightened. "And if I refuse?" "Then I'll thank you for your service, and you can keep running the admin office." She gave a small, resigned laugh. That doesn't sound like much of a choice. It's the best kind, he said gently, the kind you get to make yourself. That evening she found herself in Hangar 6, once a noisy training hall, now empty except for a single long table stacked with maps. She traced her fingers over the grid lines, the inked coordinates, the shapes of operations that no longer existed. Rodriguez entered quietly, 2 mugs of coffee in hand. Figured you'd be here. Habit, she said. He handed her a mug. So, you taking the offer? I don't know. She stared at the steam rising between them. Part of me wants to help. The other part's tired of reliving everything. Rodriguez leaned against the table. You think teaching these kids what you know is reliving it. It's passing it forward. Let the next generation carry it better. She smiled faintly. You always make it sound simple. It is, but it's right. Silence stretched, comfortable, almost peaceful. Outside, the ocean winds howled through the hangar's metal seams. Finally, she said, I'll think about it. Good, he replied. Just don't think too long, the world doesn't wait. 2 days later, Cellini stood on the same parade ground where it had all begun. The SEAL trainees were assembled again, though this time their laughter was cautious, their pride tempered. Admiral Thompson addressed them briefly before stepping aside. You'll be receiving tactical response instruction from someone uniquely qualified, he announced. Chief Parker, front and center. A hush fell. Cellini stepped forward in simple fatigues, no medals, no visible rank insignia. Yet the way she moved, the quiet precision, commanded attention more than any decoration could. Morrison and his team straightened unconsciously as she passed. She stopped before them, eyes scanning the crowd. Yesterday, she began, you saw what happens when panic replaces training, but you also saw what happens when instinct meets discipline. That's what we're building here. Her voice was steady low, but every syllable carried weight. You won't be learning tactics from me, she continued. You'll be learning judgment, the difference between reaction and decision, between pride and purpose. She paused, letting silence fill the space. Questions. No one spoke. Good, she said, then let's begin. Over the following weeks the base changed. Under Cellini's guidance, drills became cleaner, faster, more coordinated. She pushed the teams hard but never raised her voice. Her corrections were surgical, precise words that cut through ego and went straight to discipline. Morrison's squad improved the most. They started finishing exercises early, moving as a single unit. Rodriguez called it the Parker effect. Yet despite her growing respect across the base, Cellini kept her distance. She ate alone, walked the perimeter at dusk, stayed long after everyone left. And at night, when the ocean winds whispered through her apartment window, she still woke from the same dream, desert dust, broken radio static, and the faces of the 9 she couldn't bring home. Healing wasn't linear, it never had been. One stormy evening, Rodriguez found her again, this time on the dock, watching lightning fork over the Pacific. You ever gonna tell me what really happened out there? He asked gently. She didn't look at him. Would it change anything? No, but it might help you stop carrying it alone. The rain started, soft and cold. She let it soak her uniform. Operation Mercury, she whispered. We went in for extraction. Intel said 2 hostiles. There were 30. I made the call to hold position. 3 hours later, air support arrived. We lost 9. I signed the report calling it a success. Her voice broke. It was. Rodriguez didn't speak. He simply stood beside her until the rain masked her tears. Finally, she said, that's why I left. I thought if I disappeared, maybe the guilt would too. And did it? She shook her head. It just got quieter. He nodded. Then maybe this place, these kids, is how you make it right. By midnight, the storm had passed. The base lights shimmered against wet pavement. Cellini stood alone at the edge of the dock, the sea breathing against the shore. For the first time in years, she felt the ache of something almost forgotten, hope. Not loud, not triumphant, just quiet and steady like the tide itself. She closed her eyes and whispered, "Maybe peace isn't silence, maybe it's service." The ocean didn't answer, but somehow she knew it agreed. Why did her hands start trembling again, after all this time? The sky over Coronado burned pale gold as dawn crept over the horizon. Waves crashed against the seawall, rhythmic, endless, like a heartbeat that wouldn't stop. And Selene Parker, once lieutenant commander, now chief instructor, stood in front of 12 young SEALs, the same age she'd been when she first learned what real fear felt like. She wore no insignia, no medals, just fatigues, boots, and that calm presence that made every man straighten instinctively when she entered the room. Her training sessions had started quietly. No grand speeches, no shouted commands. She preferred silence, the kind that made people listen harder. Situational awareness begins before the mission, she told them, walking along the line of trainees. It begins the moment you open your eyes. You don't need orders to notice the world changing around you. She stopped in front of Morrison. He'd grown steadier these last weeks, shoulders squared, eyes sharper. "Petty officer," she said, "what's the first rule of leadership under fire?" He answered instantly, "Don't panic." She tilted her head. "Wrong, you will panic, everyone does. The rule is don't stay panicked." A faint smile tugged at the corners of her mouth, just enough to break the tension. Rodriguez, watching from the sidelines, shook his head in quiet admiration. "Never thought I'd see rookies listen that hard to anyone." "She's not teaching tactics," Hawkins murmured beside him. "She's teaching control." And she was. Every drill, every simulation Selene led came back to one idea: control under chaos. But control wasn't something she taught. It was something she fought for every day. Because every time she heard a door slam or a distant explosion during training, her mind flickered back to that desert, to the sound of shrapnel tearing through calm static, to the silence that followed the names she'd never stop hearing. That night, she stood alone on the training field after everyone left. The lights glowed dimly through the fog, shadows stretching across the sandbag barricades and target dummies. Her breathing was shallow, her hands trembled. She reached for the radio lying on the table, thumb brushing the button, and froze. A sound, low, metallic, echoing, came from the far end of the field. Her instincts flared before her reason did. She crouched low, scanning the perimeter, moving like she had back in the field, silent, precise, dangerous. A figure appeared: Morrison. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "didn't mean to startle you." She exhaled slowly, lowering her hand. "You didn't, just reflex." He nodded. "I stayed to run the exercise again. Didn't want to quit until I got it perfect." "There's no perfect in combat," she said, her tone softer now. "Only prepared." "Then I'll take that." She studied him a moment, then said, "Walk with me." They walked along the perimeter, the base quiet around them, lights reflecting off wet asphalt. "You know what you did wrong in the last exercise?" she asked. "I hesitated," he admitted. "Didn't trust my instinct." "Why not?" "Because I didn't want to be reckless." Selene nodded. "There's a fine line between caution and hesitation. Caution keeps you alive. Hesitation gets you killed. The trick is learning the difference." He looked at her, curiosity glinting. "Did you ever hesitate?" The question hit her harder than he knew. "Once, on a ridge line in Kandahar. Just 2 seconds. Long enough to decide between holding position and pulling her team back. Long enough to lose 9 men. She forced a steady breath. "Yes," she said finally, "and I've been making peace with it ever since." Morrison didn't press. He didn't need to. They walked in silence for a while before he asked, "What made you come back?" She thought about that, the fog, the radio, the faces that haunted her every night. "Because you can't teach peace," she said quietly, until you understand war. 3 days later, the Admiral authorized a live response drill, classified, high-level, involving both SEAL teams and base security units. A joint operation under simulated attack. Cellini would oversee it. Her team, Morrison, Torres, Wilson, and Chavez, would be the response squad. Rodriguez called it a test. Cellini called it a reckoning. She briefed the men at 500. "This isn't about who's the fastest or strongest," she said. "It's about coordination under uncertainty. You'll receive fragmented intel, shifting orders, and multiple unknowns. Adaptation is survival." Torres grinned nervously. "You're not gonna make this easy on us, are you, ma'am?" She raised an eyebrow. "Would you respect me if I did?" They laughed short, nervous laughter, but it broke the tension. The drill began at dawn. Sirens blared across the base. Simulated explosions echoed through the training grounds. Smoke grenades poured thick plumes of gray into the air. Cellini monitored from the command tent, headset crackling. Her team's voices filled the channel, shouting coordinates, checking sectors, calling in reports. Morrison to command, Gate 2 secure, moving to Bravo corridor. "Copy that," she replied. "Watch your 6. Intel suggests a second breach vector." Her voice stayed calm, even measured. Then something shifted. A second signal, static and distortion, cut into the comms. A voice, unfamiliar, male, cold. "Base command, this is Unit Bravo 5, requesting immediate authorization code. Who's running this op?" Cellini froze. That voice wasn't part of the drill. Rodriguez noticed her expression. "What's wrong?" "Bravo 5 isn't one of ours," she said. "Cut channel crosslink now." "Already on it." But before he could finish, a sound cracked over the line, gunfire. Real, not simulated. Everyone in the tent went still. Cellini's voice dropped to a whisper. "That's not part of the exercise." Outside, alarms switched from yellow to red. Real alert. "Command to all units, this is not a drill," she said, tone sharpening. "Repeat, not a drill. Confirm location of shots fired." A voice answered Morrison's, breathless. "Gate 2, ma'am. Unknown contact near the supply trucks. We have movement, armed individuals." Rodriguez grabbed his radio. "Security teams en route. Hold position, Morrison." But Cellini was already moving. The world narrowed to instinct. She ran across the tarmac, wind slicing through her hair, boots pounding against concrete. Her pulse slowed, even as her body accelerated. Every corner, every shadow was a potential threat, every decision immediate. As she approached the supply zone, she saw them. 3 figures in dark clothing moving between parked vehicles, weapons visible. Morrison's squad was pinned behind a barricade, returning controlled fire. Cellini didn't hesitate. She dropped beside Morrison, grabbed his rifle, and scanned the sector. "Report," she said. "Unknown hostiles," he replied. "No insignia, minimal comms. Engagement protocol. Non-lethal if possible." "Good." She shifted position, signaling with her hand. Torres flanked left, Wilson covered rear. One of the hostiles moved into view, rifle raised. Cellini exhaled slowly, squeezed the trigger once. The shot hit the ground near the man's feet, forcing him down. Morrison moved in, tackling him. The others scattered, one toward the fence, one deeper into the lot. Cellini sprinted forward, cutting them off. Her breath was steady, her vision clear. No panic, no ghosts, just precision. She cornered the last man against a truck. "Drop it," she barked. He froze, then raised his hands. Security teams swarmed seconds later, weapons drawn. Rodriguez arrived, panting. "Everyone secure." Cellini nodded. 3 suspects detained, no casualties. He exhaled, relief mixing with disbelief. "You just prevented a real breach during a simulated one." Morrison looked at her, awe flickering across his face. "How did you know it wasn't part of the exercise?" Because drills don't smell like cordite, she said quietly, and fear sounds different when it's real. Hours later, the suspects were in custody, contractors gone rogue, attempting to smuggle restricted tech off base under cover of the drill. The admiral himself oversaw the debrief. "You saved this installation, Chief," he said afterward. "Again." Cellini's expression was unreadable. "Just doing my job, sir." He gave a wry smile. "You keep saying that, but everyone here knows it's more than that." As he left, Morrison approached. "Ma'am," he said softly, "you didn't panic, not once." Cellini looked out at the horizon, where the sun bled orange across the water. "Oh, I did," she said. "I just didn't let it decide for me." He absorbed that silently. Then for the first time she added, "You did well today, petty officer." Morrison smiled, pride flickering behind exhaustion. "Thank you, ma'am, means a lot." "Don't thank me," she said. "Earn it again tomorrow." That night, alone in her quarters, Cellini finally let herself breathe. The day's adrenaline faded, replaced by something else, clarity. She looked at her reflection in the dark window. For the first time in years, she didn't see the broken officer who'd walked away. She saw the woman who stayed, who came back, not because she had to, but because the world still needed her too. She whispered to the reflection, voice barely audible, "You don't get to run anymore." The ocean outside roared in quiet agreement. Why did her name appear on a file that should have stayed buried forever? 3 days after the real-world breach, the base was back to routine. Or at least, that's what everyone pretended. New floodlights glared along the fences, extra sentries patrolled the docks, and the rumor mill burned hotter than jet exhaust. But inside the Admiral's office, nothing felt routine. Cellini Parker stood at attention as Admiral Thompson closed a thin manila folder stamped reinstatement, advisory status. His voice was steady, but there was weight behind every word. "Effective immediately, Chief Parker. You are reinstated to active advisory duty under Naval Special Operations Command. You'll oversee crisis coordination, tactical leadership, and psychological resilience training." He extended the document across the desk. Her fingers hesitated before taking it. The paper was crisp, new, her name in clean black ink. She hadn't seen it printed on military orders in almost 5 years. "Sir," she said quietly, "I thought I left that world behind." Thompson leaned back, studying her. "The world changes, Chief, and sometimes it calls people back who never stopped serving." Across the room, Rodriguez grinned. "Told you they wouldn't let you disappear." Cellini managed the ghost of a smile. "I was hoping they'd forget." "No chance," he said. "You're too good at being remembered." The ceremony was informal, held in the hangar bay at sunset. No medals, no press, just a folded flag, a simple salute, and a silence that meant more than applause. Morrison's team stood in the back, boots polished, faces proud. When she turned to face them, every man snapped to attention, not out of protocol but respect. "Congratulations, Chief," Morrison said afterward, shaking her hand. "Don't congratulate me yet," she replied. "I'm the one who will be doubling your drills." He laughed, but her eyes were serious. She didn't want reverence, she wanted results. Over the next week, the base moved under her rhythm. Training evolved, less noise, more purpose. Cellini's voice became the constant heartbeat of the compound, echoing through loudspeakers and open radios. "Control your breath. Trust your instincts. Don't confuse motion with progress." Even the senior officers started quoting her lines during briefings. At night, she stayed in the operations room reviewing footage, mapping strategies, tweaking drills until every second mattered. She didn't need sleep. She needed control. But one night, control slipped. Rodriguez found her there at 100, staring at the screen, frozen. "What is it?" he asked. The monitor showed a mission archive. Old footage marked Operation Mercury. The file wasn't supposed to exist anymore. It had been buried, sealed, forgotten. Someone had re-uploaded it. Seleni's voice on the recording came through faintly, distorted by static. Team 7 hold position. Air support inbound in 3 mics. Do not advance. Then gunfire, screams, the sound of chaos eating through the desert air. Rodriguez froze beside her. Where did this come from? She shook her head. No idea, the file's encrypted, but someone wanted me to see it. The playback ended with her own breathing, ragged, choked, and a voice she'd never forgotten. We lost contact, Commander. Repeat, we're cut off. Then silence. Selene shut the monitor off, hands trembling. It should have stayed buried. Rodriguez spoke gently. Maybe it's time it didn't. The next morning, Admiral Thompson summoned her. His tone was formal again, but his eyes betrayed concern. Chief, NCIS traced the source of that upload. It came from an overseas server connected to a private security firm, Black Haven Group. Selene's jaw tightened. Mercenaries. More than that, he said. They were subcontracted under Operation Mercury. Some of their operators didn't make it home. One of them apparently blames you. Her pulse slowed. She remembered the name before he said it. Captain Mason Keller. Thompson nodded. He resurfaced 2 weeks ago, working freelance security out of Dubai. Now he's leaking fragments of classified data, personal, targeted. Selene looked away, voice low. He was there that day. I thought he died with the others. He didn't, and from the looks of it, he wants you to remember that. That night the dreams came back. The ridge line, the dust, the heat. Her radio screaming with half-words and static. Keller's voice shouting, we can make it if we push. And hers calm but desperate, negative, fall back, that's an order. Then the explosion. Sunlight turning red, earth collapsing, comms going dead. She woke gasping, drenched in sweat, staring into the dark. The clock read 03:12. She sat up, rubbing her face. For a moment she almost reached for the sidearm she didn't keep anymore. Some scars don't fade. They just learn to sleep until you wake them. By sunrise, she was back at the training yard. Morrison's team was running close-quarters drills when she walked in, eyes shadowed, movements clipped. Again, she said. They ran it too slow. Again. Rodriguez watched from the sidelines, sensing the shift. Her perfectionism had teeth this morning. Every mistake hit her like personal failure. After the 5th repetition, Morrison finally spoke. Ma'am, with respect, what are we training for exactly? Because this feels like we're chasing ghosts. The words hit their mark. Selene stopped, turned slowly. Maybe we are, she said, but ghosts kill people too if you ignore them. Silence, then she took a breath, softened, dismissed. The men dispersed quietly, confusion and worry blending in their faces. Rodriguez approached after they'd gone. You can't outrun whatever's coming, Chief. She stared at the horizon. I'm not running, I'm waiting. 2 nights later, her wait ended. The base intercom buzzed her awake at 200. Chief Parker, report to command. Priority 1. She dressed in seconds. In the ops room, the Admiral, Rodriguez, and Agent Collins stood over a live feed, satellite imagery flickering with coordinates. Black Haven Group, Collins said. They hit a convoy near Djibouti. Same pattern as Mercury, same tactics. Selene leaned closer. And Keller. He's leading them. She exhaled slowly. Then this isn't random. He's sending a message. Looks that way, Collins said, and Command wants you to help decipher it. Thompson added, you're the only surviving officer who knows that terrain, those patterns, those people. We're assembling a joint task unit. You won't be field active, but we need your insight. The room felt colder suddenly. Sir, she said, if I help plan this, it stops being about tactics. It becomes personal. Maybe that's exactly why you should do it. Rodriguez said quietly. She looked at him, really looked, and saw that he wasn't pushing her back into war. He was offering her a way out of it. If she faced Keller, maybe the ghosts would finally stop whispering. The following afternoon, she walked the beach alone, combat boots sinking into wet sand. Seagulls circled overhead. The tide rolled in, erasing her footprints as fast as she made them. She thought about Keller, the man who'd once been her friend, her second in command, the one who'd begged to advance when she'd ordered retreat. He'd blamed her ever since. Now he was out there, somewhere in the desert again, recreating the same chaos they'd barely survived. Maybe he wasn't after revenge. Maybe he was just trying to prove that her decision had been wrong. The thought burned like salt in an open wound. She stopped walking, stared out at the horizon, and whispered, "You still don't understand, Mason. Surviving wasn't the victory." That evening she returned to the operations room. Maps covered the walls. Surveillance footage rolled across monitors. Rodriguez looked up as she entered. "You ready?" Selene set her coffee down, eyes clear for the first time in weeks. "Yeah, let's finish what we started 5 years ago." He smiled faintly. "That's the chief I remember." "Not chief," she corrected, "commander." She picked up a marker and drew a red line across the map. "He'll strike here next. He always moves toward supply routes, not away from them." Collins watched in awe. "How do you know?" "Because I taught him." The room fell silent. Selene circled the coordinates again, slower this time. "If we stop him here, we stop the pattern, but we'll need boots on the ground." Rodriguez caught her tone. "You're not volunteering, are you?" She looked up steady. "If I plan this and someone dies because I wasn't there, I'll never forgive myself." "Chief." She raised a hand. "I know the risks, but if Keller's looking for me, he won't talk to anyone else. Let me end it the way it began." Thompson studied her for a long, tense moment. Then he said quietly, "Approved. You leave in 48 hours." That night she stood at the edge of the runway, watching aircraft blink against the stars. The Pacific wind whipped through her hair. Morrison approached, hesitant. "Heard you're deploying, ma'am." "Seems I am." He swallowed. "If you need backup." "Not this time," she said gently. "This one's mine." He nodded, eyes full of worry. "Then bring it home, Chief." She smiled faintly. "I intend to." As he left, she turned toward the dark horizon, heart steady. The ocean stretched endlessly ahead, quiet, indifferent, vast. Somewhere beyond that horizon waited a man she'd once trusted with her life. Now she was going back to face him. Not for vengeance, not for redemption. For closure. And for every ghost still waiting in the dust. How do you prepare to return to the place that broke you? 48 hours later, the C-130 roared through the dawn sky, slicing east across the Atlantic. Inside, the cabin smelled of oil, sweat, and adrenaline. Gear rattled with each pocket of turbulence. Selene Parker sat strapped near the rear ramp, headset over one ear, eyes half closed. Across from her, 4 operators from Joint Task Unit 7 watched her in cautious silence. They'd read the brief. They knew the legend, the officer who'd vanished after Mercury, the woman who'd returned to save a base with nothing but instinct. But up close she didn't look like a legend. She looked calm, ordinary. A still lake hiding a storm beneath. The pilot's voice crackled over comms. 30 minutes to drop zone, visibility fair, desert temps already climbing. Selene glanced out the window. Below, the land stretched endless, sand bleeding into rock, rock into shadow. The same landscape that haunted her sleep. Rodriguez's voice came through her earpiece from the command center back in San Diego. "You sure you're ready for this, Chief?" She smiled faintly. "You're asking too late, Master Chief." He chuckled. "That's what I was afraid of." The team touched down on a dirt airstrip near Djibouti before sunrise. The heat was already oppressive, pressing through their gear like a living thing. They moved quickly, minimal chatter, tight formation. Local command briefed them in a prefab tent, maps spread across a steel table. Agent Collins stood beside a satellite feed. "Our intel places Keller's cell here." She pointed to a valley carved between two ridges. "They've hijacked a convoy carrying classified signal interceptors. They're planning to sell them to unknown buyers within 72 hours. Cellini studied the terrain. No direct roads, no aerial line of sight. He's chosen isolation on purpose. "Exactly," Collins said. "Your objective is simple: confirm Keller's presence, extract intel, and neutralize the cell if engaged." Rodriguez's voice cut through again, via secure link. "Command will be monitoring. You'll have satellite recon and drone coverage." Cellini nodded, but she wasn't listening to logistics anymore. Her mind was already there in the valley, under the heat, hearing Keller's voice echoing through memory. "Wheels up in 30, she said quietly. They rode out in armored transports, suspension groaning against the uneven ground. The horizon shimmered white with heat. Morrison wasn't there. She left him behind for a reason. Some wars didn't need witnesses. The convoy halted 5 miles out. The rest would be on foot. As the sun climbed higher, the world became soundless except for wind and heartbeat. Each step through the sand felt heavier than the last. By midday, they reached the ridge overlooking the valley. Through binoculars, Cellini spotted movement, tents, vehicles, heat ripples. And there, near the center, a man standing beside a truck, sun glinting off a rifle slung casually across his back. Mason Keller. He looked older, leaner, sunburnt, but his posture was the same, confident, defiant, the kind of man who still believed he'd been right all along. Her breath slowed. For 5 years, she'd replayed their last words. Now she was close enough to see the scar that traced across his cheek, the one she hadn't caused but still felt responsible for. "Target confirmed," she whispered. "Orders?" asked Sergeant Lynn, her second. Cellini lowered the binoculars. "We move at dusk." That evening, as shadows stretched long across the dunes, they advanced. The air cooled just enough for breath to turn visible. The valley glowed orange under the dying sun. Cellini moved first, her body remembering what her mind feared it had forgotten: the rhythm of stealth, the measured exhale before a step, the pulse syncing with the desert's silence. They reached the outer perimeter without detection. A guard passed within 10 feet of her position. She could smell the sweat, the dust, the metal of his rifle. She waited for his shadow to fade before signaling the others forward. One by one, they slipped through the gap in the fence, ghosts in fading light. Inside, the camp was quiet, too quiet. Cellini's instincts prickled. Then a click. "Tripwire." She barely whispered the warning, "Down." The explosion ripped the night apart. Sand and smoke swallowed the air. Gunfire erupted from every direction. Her team dove for cover, returning fire in controlled bursts. "Ambush," Lynn shouted. "They were waiting for us." Cellini's ears rang, world spinning. Through the haze, she saw Keller step from the main tent, calm, almost smiling. He had known she'd come. "Hold fire," she yelled, lifting a hand. The shooting slowed, hesitated. Keller's voice carried across the chaos. "Always the same, Cellini. Walk into traps and call it leadership." Her heart thudded once hard. "You planned this." He shrugged. "I knew command would send someone. I just didn't think they'd send you." "Then you don't know command anymore," she said. He laughed, a dry, bitter sound. "You still think you did the right thing that day, leaving us out there." "I saved who I could. By letting the rest burn." She steadied her rifle. "You made that choice when you advanced against orders." He shook his head. "No, Cellini, I made that choice because I trusted you, follow, but you didn't." For a moment, silence stretched between them, heavy with 5 years of ghosts. Then Keller gestured toward the burning trucks. We're not enemies, you and I not really. The system that used us, that's the enemy. Don't do this, she said. Join me, he said softly. Help me show them what they created. Something flickered in his eyes, grief twisted into conviction. Selene lowered her weapon an inch. Mason, whatever you're trying to prove, it's not redemption. It's surrender with a flag on it. His jaw tightened. Then we're done talking. He turned to his men. Take them. The firefight exploded again. Selene dropped behind a rock, barking orders. Lynn, flank right, cover the rear. Bullets shredded the sand inches from her face. Heat scorched her lungs. She fired back, precise, disciplined, counting every shot. She wasn't in training anymore. This was real. She saw Keller retreat toward a tunnel at the back of the camp. Instinct screamed, he's escaping. Lynn, hold position. I'm going after him. Ma'am. But she was already running. The tunnel led into a cavern carved from sandstone. The air was cool, echoing with the faint hum of generators. Keller's shadow moved ahead, weaving through flickering light. Don't make me do this, she called. His voice echoed back. You already did once. She rounded a corner and froze. He stood at the end of the tunnel, rifle lowered, expression unreadable. You can't keep carrying their ghosts, he said. You think they'd want this. You think they'd want you still saluting a flag that buried them. Her hands shook, but her aim stayed true. I'm not here for flags, I'm here for peace. Then put the gun down. I can't. A long pause. Then Keller stepped closer, eyes softening. You were the best leader I ever had, Selene, but you let guilt turn you into a ghost. And you let grief turn you into an enemy. He flinched just slightly. Enough. A sound echoed behind him, Lynn's voice over comms. Target in tunnel. Chief, you clear. Keller's eyes flicked toward the sound. Reflex made him lift his rifle. She didn't hesitate. One shot. It struck his shoulder, spinning him backward. He fell, gasping. Selene ran forward, kicking the rifle away, pressing her hand to the wound. Stay down, Mason. Don't make it worse. He looked up at her, pain twisting into a half-smile. You always did shoot straight. She swallowed hard. Medical evac inbound, don't move. He shook his head weakly. No evac for me, I'm done fighting. Mason. Maybe now, he whispered, we both can stop running. His eyes closed. The desert went still. When the medevac landed 30 minutes later, she was still there, sitting beside him, blood on her hands, face streaked with dust and tears. Rodriguez's voice came through her earpiece. Chief, report. Her answer was quiet, steady. Mission complete, target neutralized, no further hostiles. A long pause, then copy that, Chief, come home. She looked at Keller's still form one last time. Home, she whispered. Yeah, maybe this time. By dawn, the valley was silent again. She stood at the edge of the ridge, the first light of morning breaking over endless sand. The wind carried the faint scent of smoke and dust, the ghosts finally quiet. She whispered to them all, the ones she'd lost, the ones she'd saved. You can rest now, I'll take it from here. Then she turned, walking toward the rising sun, her shadow stretching long behind her. For the first time in years, she didn't feel the weight of her rank. Only the quiet, unspoken truth that she had done what she came to do. Peace wasn't the absence of battle. It was the courage to end one. Why did coming home feel harder than leaving? The plane touched down at dawn. The hum of the engines faded into silence as the ramp lowered, and desert air gave way to the cool salt breeze of the California coast. Selene Parker stepped out first, the Pacific wind brushing against her face, tugging strands of her hair loose from the braid. She was supposed to feel relief. She was supposed to feel something. But she didn't. Behind her, 2 medics unloaded a sealed stretcher, Mason Keller's body wrapped in the flag he once served under. The base crew saluted quietly as they passed. No words, no questions, just silence, the kind that speaks of respect, regret, and things better left unspoken. Rodriguez was waiting at the tarmac, cap in hand. His eyes met hers, steady, understanding, heavy with the kind of empathy that only soldiers earn. "Welcome home, Chief," he said softly. She nodded, feel strange hearing that again. "It's supposed to." He didn't ask how it went. He didn't have to. The exhaustion in her eyes told the story, the victory that didn't feel like one, the peace that tasted like sand and loss. Later in her quarters, the silence pressed harder. Her gear sat untouched in the corner, still caked with dust. The blood on her gloves had dried to a brown stain she hadn't found the strength to wash away yet. She sat at her desk, unwrapping the envelope the NCIS courier had handed her before she left the mission site. No return address, just her name, written in block letters that made her pulse catch. Inside was a small flash drive. A note was folded beneath it, 2 words in Keller's handwriting. "For you." Her throat tightened. She plugged the drive into her laptop. The screen flickered to life, and a single video file appeared. "Play me." She hesitated for a long time before pressing play. The image was grainy, recorded on a handheld camera. Keller sat at a makeshift desk, desert wind howling behind him. His face was tired, eyes hollow, but there was no hate left in them. "Selene," he began quietly, "if you're watching this, then you found me, or what's left of me." He gave a faint smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I used to think you betrayed us, that your order to hold back was cowardice. It took me years to understand it was mercy. You saved the ones who could still be saved. I couldn't see it then. I didn't want to." He exhaled, glancing away for a moment. "You always said leadership wasn't about being right. It was about doing what had to be done. I never understood that until I became what I hated. I thought I was fighting for justice, but all I was doing was fighting ghosts." His gaze lifted back to the lens. "Don't carry mine anymore. You don't owe me that. You gave me more peace than war ever did." He paused, then said softly, "And if you ever find your way back home, teach them what we learned the hard way. That courage isn't pulling the trigger. It's living with the choices you didn't want to make." The video ended. Selene sat there frozen. Then the first tear fell, slow and silent. She didn't go to the mess hall that night, didn't answer Rodriguez's calls. Instead, she walked to the edge of the docks, where the Pacific stretched endlessly beneath a moonlit sky. The water shimmered like glass. She stood there for a long time, Keller's words echoing in her mind. "Don't carry mine anymore." But grief wasn't something you put down. It just changed shape. Her reflection stared back at her, stronger now but lonelier too. Footsteps approached behind her. "Figured I'd find you here," said Rodriguez. She didn't turn. "I needed air." "Yeah, you and me both." He joined her at the railing, the ocean wind tugging at his uniform. "He left you something, didn't he?" She nodded. "A confession, maybe an apology, maybe both." Rodriguez studied the waves. "Sometimes that's the best we get." She looked at him. "Do you ever stop hearing them, the ones you lost?" He shook his head slowly. "No, but they get quieter, not because you forget, but because you finally start talking back." Selene smiled faintly. "And what do you say?" He gazed out at the horizon. "I tell them I'm still here, that I'm trying to make it mean something." The wind picked up, carrying the smell of salt and jet fuel. Selene whispered, almost to herself, "He said I should teach them what we learned the hard way." Rodriguez smiled. "Then maybe it's time you start." The next morning she did. At 600, the training yard was already alive with movement, rows of SEALs and recruits assembling under the pale dawn. They expected another tactical lecture. Instead, Selene stood in front of them unarmed, no headset, no notes. "I want to tell you about failure," she began. The word cut through the noise like a blade. Every head turned toward her. I used to think failure was losing a mission, or watching a friend fall, or being told you weren't enough. But that's not failure. Failure is refusing to get back up because you're afraid of what you'll find when you do. Her voice trembled once, then steadied. I've lost people. I've made calls that haunt me. I've carried guilt that nearly broke me. But the truth is, war doesn't end when the shooting stops. It ends when you learn to forgive yourself. Silence filled the field. Even the wind seemed to still. She took a slow breath. You'll all face your own versions of that, maybe not on a battlefield, maybe just in your own mind. But remember this, bravery isn't about surviving combat, it's about surviving yourself. Her eyes swept the crowd, meeting Morrison's tours, all of them. And if you ever forget that, look around. You're not alone. She stepped back, letting the silence breathe. Rodriguez clapped once. You heard the chief fall in. The field erupted into motion again, but the energy had changed. It wasn't just discipline now. It was purpose. That evening, Cellini sat alone in her office, writing something she hadn't written in years. A letter. Not to command, not to the admiral, to herself. You did what you could. You lost who you had to. You came back anyway. You don't have to prove anything anymore. Just live. She folded the page, slipped it into a drawer, and turned off the light. When she stepped outside, the sunset washed the base in gold. The sound of laughter drifted from the mess hall, young voices, alive, unbroken. Morrison spotted her and waved. Ma'am, joining us tonight. She hesitated, then smiled. Yeah, maybe for a bit. As she walked toward the group, Rodriguez's voice echoed from somewhere behind her. See, you can teach old ghosts new tricks. She laughed quietly, maybe so. Later that night, she stood once more at the docks, moonlight glinting off the calm sea. This time she didn't come alone. Morrison and his team joined her, standing shoulder to shoulder. None of them spoke. They didn't need to. In silence, they saluted the horizon, toward the men and women who hadn't made it home. The gesture wasn't ceremonial. It was personal, human. When they lowered their hands, Cellini whispered the words Keller had once said. Courage isn't pulling the trigger. It's living with the choices you didn't want to make. Morrison looked at her. Did you ever find peace, ma'am? She considered the question for a long moment, then smiled softly. Peace isn't something you find, Morrison. It's something you build, one honest day at a time. The waves lapped gently at the dock, steady and eternal. The wind carried the faint hum of distant engines, jets training for the next mission, the next challenge. Cellini watched the lights fade into the horizon and whispered to herself, You can stop running now. And for the first time, the voice in her mind, the one that used to whisper blame, answered with silence. Why did the base fall silent when her name was called, one last time? The parade ground shimmered beneath the late morning sun. Flags snapped sharply against the breeze. Rows of uniforms stretched in perfect formation, each face turned toward the small podium at the center of the courtyard. Cellini Parker stood at the edge of the crowd, hands clasped behind her back, no medals pinned to her chest, just the quiet composure of someone who'd lived enough to know what honors were worth. This wasn't a promotion ceremony. It wasn't a farewell either. It was something in between, a recognition that didn't fit in regulations. The Admiral stepped up to the microphone. 5 years ago, Chief Parker left the field, he began, his voice steady. She left because she believed her time had ended, because she believed others could carry the weight better. But a few months ago, she reminded us all of something we forget too easily. That service isn't a uniform, it's a choice. He paused, letting his gaze sweep the crowd. She saved this base, led this unit, and faced a past most of us would have buried forever. And she did it with no fanfare, no speeches, and no demand for credit. So today, we honor her, not for what she's done, but for who she's become. He looked toward her, Chief Parker front and center. Selene hesitated for a heartbeat, then stepped forward. Her boots struck the concrete with quiet rhythm, the kind that made every sound in the world fade around it. The Admiral reached for the small, navy blue box on the podium and opened it. Inside was a single medal, the Distinguished Service Cross. But he didn't pin it to her uniform. He held it out instead, for valor in command, for courage in silence, for leadership without recognition. She looked down at it, then slowly, respectfully closed the box. "Sir," she said softly, "with permission, I'd like to have this displayed in the training hall, for the ones still learning what it means to lead." The Admiral smiled faintly. Permission granted. The crowd didn't cheer. They didn't need to. The silence that followed carried more meaning than applause ever could. After the ceremony, she slipped away to the hangar, escaping the crowd's eyes. The echo of footsteps faded behind her, replaced by the steady hum of distant engines. The training hall stood empty. On the far wall hung a mural of names, men and women who'd served, fallen, and been remembered. Some were names she knew, others she'd trained, all part of the same quiet lineage of sacrifice. She set the metal box at the base of the wall. For a long moment, she just stood there. "Rest easy," she whispered. Rodriguez's voice broke the silence behind her. "You know, you could have kept that. No one would have judged you." She turned, smiling faintly. "It's not mine alone." He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Still, someone's got to make sure they know who taught them half of what they know. Let them find out the way that matters," she said, "by doing it better than we did." He chuckled. "Always the teacher." "Always the student," she corrected. They stood there in silence, side by side, watching the sunlight spill through the high windows, touching the names on the wall. That evening she walked to the docks one last time. The ocean stretched calm and endless, as if nothing in the world had ever changed. But she had. The base lights flickered in the distance, their reflections shimmering across the water like faint stars. She remembered her first day here, the laughter, the arrogance, the way Morrison had asked her rank like it was a joke. Now that same young SEAL walked toward her, a confident calm replacing the swagger he once wore. "Evening, ma'am," he said. "Evening, Morrison. I thought you'd be celebrating." He smiled. "We did, but I figured I should say thank you before you disappear again." She laughed softly. "Disappearing's kind of my thing." "Then I'll keep finding you," he said. "You taught us more than drills. You taught us how to carry ourselves when no one's watching." She nodded, emotion glinting behind her calm. "That's the only lesson that matters." He hesitated, then added, "There's talk you're transferring truth." "Truth," she said. "Advisory work for the academy. I'll be training new officers, fresh faces, clean slates." "They're lucky," he said. "No," she replied. "They're ready, that's different." He saluted her, not as a gesture of rank but of respect. She returned it, and when he left, she turned back to the sea, the sound of the waves matching the quiet rhythm of her breathing. A few weeks later, the academy's classroom was alive with the sound of new recruits, nervous laughter, boots scuffing polished floors, the smell of ink and paper and ambition. Selene stood at the front, chalk in hand, staring at the empty board. She could hear the whispers, students recognizing the name from stories that had already begun to spread through the ranks. She wrote 2 words on the board. "Quiet strength." The chatter died immediately. "You'll hear a lot of definitions for leadership," she began. "Most of them will sound loud: command, power, authority. But real strength isn't noise. It's what holds steady when everything else breaks." She let her eyes travel across the room, young, bright, unscarred faces. The future sitting right in front of her. "I'm not here to make you heroes," she said. "I'm here to make sure you understand the cost of pretending to be one." A hush settled, the kind born of respect and the awareness that truth had just been spoken. "When you walk into chaos," she continued, "you won't always have orders. Sometimes you'll only have conscience. Learn to trust it. Learn to listen to the voice that tells you when silence is louder than shouting. She paused, setting the chalk down. And remember, courage isn't measured by what you destroy. It's measured by what you protect. The class remained quiet, every eye fixed on her. For the first time, Selene didn't feel the weight of command pressing down. She felt the purpose of it rising up. That night she sat alone on the academy rooftop, city lights glowing far beyond the base. The air was cool, the kind that carried peace instead of memories. Rodriguez called from the base, his voice warm through the static. "You settling in?" She smiled, trying to. "They say you made half the new recruits cry on day one." "Good," she said. "Better they learn now than out there." He laughed. "You know, Parker, if I didn't know better, I'd think you finally found what you were looking for." Her eyes drifted toward the horizon. "Not found," she said. "Accepted." A pause, then he said softly, "You did good, Chief." She smiled faintly. "No, Master Chief, we did." When the call ended, she leaned back, gazing at the night sky. Stars blinked faintly through thin clouds, steady and timeless. She thought of the names carved on that wall, the lessons etched into every scar, and the laughter she'd begun to share again. There was no grand ending, no cinematic explosion, no orchestra swelling behind her story. Just life continuing. And for the first time, that was enough. She closed her eyes, whispering words meant for no one but herself, and maybe for every soldier who'd ever stood where she had. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. The wind carried her voice out over the ocean, fading into the hum of the waves. And in that quiet, between the pulse of the sea and the steady rhythm of her breath, Selene Parker finally understood. Peace wasn't the reward for surviving the battle. Peace was learning to live afterward.